Everybody, welcome to the wasmCloud community meeting for Wednesday, May 17th. As usual, we got a pretty fun agenda. There's going to be a quick demo, and then we're going to talk about some pretty important RFCs for some of the future feature work that we have going on with wasmCloud. So to start, my demo is going to be around the burrito releases that we're doing with wasmCloud from version 63 and onwards, and how Wash supports those, along with some extra little goodies, of course. And then we've got a lot of discussion time and we've actually renamed this RFC, but decoupling the washboard from the host, transitioning the feature focus to Rust, and then the stale issue bot that came out of a couple of discussions yesterday in the wasmCloud Slack, actually. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with a little demo. So I've got a big terminal window here that I'm going to crunch down a little bit. And for those of you who have worked with wasmCloud before, you install Wash, and then you do something like wash up in order to start Nats and wasmCloud. And as of version 18, which is in alpha testing right now, we'll also start Wadum, the application deployment manager. And when you run wash up, this downloads all those utilities on your local system to the wash downloads directory and then starts them. So this demo is a little bit special because I'm not just showing version 18. This is actually going to go in version 19, but this is starting our burrito releases instead of downloading the wasmCloud tarball and then unpacking it to the directory. So as far as what you're going to have to care about as a developer, it's basically nothing. The difference between the previous Wash version and this version with wasmCloud 63 is effectively nothing. When you run wash up, it starts all those things. When you hit Control C or you run in the background and then run wash down, it'll stop those resources. The difference is under the wash downloads directory now, everything is still saved by version for the host. But instead of seeing the bin and the Erlang runtime and everything, you'll see that this is just a single binary called wasmCloud host. If we take a look at this, it's actually a single executable. There's a little bit of special things going on with the executable. I'm pretty sure technically this is a Zig binary that then unpacks the wasmCloud host to a directory, a library directory on your system. And then every time you run it from then on out, this will fail because I'm not running Nats. You can just execute it like a single binary. And so I really want to shout out Roman, who has talked about this in a couple of previous community meetings about how much nicer this is for actually running the wasmCloud application. It's a single binary. If you take a look at the actual dependencies locally, there's effectively nothing. O'Toole is the Mac equivalent of LDD. So if you take a look at this on Linux, we're not actually dynamically linking to OpenSSL anymore, which is huge. It's going to vastly simplify deploying to different Linux targets. It's static on Windows and Mac. Anyways, talking a lot about platform support, really what you're going to notice is that this will just work a lot nicer on a variety of platforms, which is, the whole benefit to this whole thing called WebAssembly that we're trying to take advantage of. Now, I wanted to also shout out to another contributor to wasmCloud, Aishwarya, who put in a PR to support wash up starting multiple hosts in quick succession. I've essentially taken that work and combined it with this version 63 PR because burritos make it a little nicer for us to be able to start multiple hosts. So as of version 19, I want to show you a little bit of how this might look. So you run wash up, put it in the background. What this does launches Nats and wasmCloud and everything. We're actually now saving the logs to the name wasmCloud and then the port that the wasmCloud dashboard is running on. If we run that again, that will actually see that you've already been running Nats and Wadum and find the next open port for the wasmCloud dashboard to run on, and then save those logs to a new file. You can continue doing this to your heart's content. I think I scan up to port 5,000, so you can start approximately 1,000 hosts on a single machine if you'd really like to. But what this is really nice for is just starting multiple wasmCloud hosts in quick succession. You can put different applications on different hosts. You can have them all connected to each other. This would just be really nice for if you're testing out a couple of different scenarios in wasmCloud and you want to run multiple hosts. Now, what also comes with this is a change to wash down, because wash down was essentially meant to be the counterpart to wash up. It was like, hey, I launched some resources with wash up. Now please tear them down. Wash down now has to take into account that you might be running multiple hosts. And in that scenario, what we do is we ask for you to either supply a host ID or use the -- all flag to stop all running hosts. So if you do wash down, and you stop a single host, that will send a request over the control interface to stop that host. But then since there are other hosts running, still doing their thing, we're going to exit a little quicker to avoid stopping NATs or WADM so that you can still interact with those currently running hosts. Now, the way that this works is if you wanted to stop the rest of them, you can do wash down -- all. This will send a stop host request to every single host that's running, and then close down WADM and NATs after that. So there are a couple of breaking changes that go in with this. Starting the burrito releases themselves would essentially not be a breaking change, but the changes around starting multiple, there are a couple of contract changes around like wash down -- all. And so I know this says I'm working with version 18 alpha 1, but this is actually going to go in version 19 of wash. And I'd like to reassure everybody that we're not close to running out of numbers anytime soon around the minor versions of wash. But just keep an eye out for this one. Should be able to finalize version 18 here in the next couple of days. That one is out as that one's out as an alpha release now, but I'd like to release that with newer, maybe the full 0.4 release of WADM, and then this breaking change can go in separately. I'm trying to avoid, as a general rule, packaging too many crazy things into a single release. So does anybody have any questions as to, the new burrito releases, the way that wash up and wash down will work? All right, cool. Well, this is a draft PR out in the Wash repository now. I'm going to be setting that up as ready for review. I've got all of the tests passing locally, but just going to be kind of coordinating some of those releases. So keep an eye out for that. I'll, of course, do announcements in the wasmCloud Slack and everything as we release those. But yeah, looking forward to you all trying it out. All righty. Now, if we go back to the might sneeze. If we go back to the agenda, next thing on the list is discussing this RFC for, and I said I renamed it. We'll change it in the notes for decoupling the washboard from the host. And I won't give too much preface because I think Kevin is here and probably, as the author, be better to talk a little bit more about the background motivation and kind of a summary of this RFC. Kevin?
All right. So I'll try and keep the summary short. The RFC itself goes into quite a bit of detail about the motivation and why we want to do it. But the main reason is that the washboard is specifically designed for developers to use as a tool for manipulating the lattice. It's basically a lattice control client. And the problem is that you have to be running a local host in order to access the washboard functionality, and that's not quite the kind of distributed, easy to use tooling that we wanted to have. What we really want is to be able to manipulate a lattice the same way you can with Wash, but using the washboard app, or whatever we end up calling it, the washboard application. So I want to be able to launch this thing from a machine that may not even have the wasmCloud host installed on it. And we go through a number of alternatives for different options that we have for building a decoupled washboard. There are some that are kind of straightforward, like using Go or Rust to embed a React application. There's one of the other options is to just basically copy and paste the existing washboard into a new application, and then Dorito, not Dorito, that's a totally different package, and then Burrito deploy that application. And then what Bailey was talking about is I did a little bit of mad sciencing over the weekend to verify that I can use Flutter and Dart to talk to nets. And not only can I do it over WebSockets, but I can do it over regular nets TCP as well. And it will actually choose whether it's going to use WebSockets or TCP based on what environment or what platform you've targeted. So pretty amazing stuff there. Yeah, one of the other options was to use U, which is another Rust front-end development framework that uses WebAssembly. If there are other options that we didn't enumerate there, feel free to, I guess, just add a comment, since this isn't technically a PR. Yeah, I think that covers most of it.
Hey, Kevin, do you want to talk through versus like creating a static application, like a React HTML thing?
The pros and cons, you mean?
Yeah, because I don't think that's one of the pros and cons listed here, but it's something that you chatted with me about a little bit.
Yeah, the pros and cons, they're kind of listed in there. It just may not be called out as part of like a static app versus non. But yeah, one of the potential downsides to building an external washboard as a web application is that it becomes a little bit more difficult to deploy, having to do things like create a React application and then shoehorn it into a binary like a Go or a Rust. Those are all things that are pretty high friction. I've been down that road before, and it looks easy when you start, but it ends up being a dumpster fire when you try and get it working for real. Yeah, Jordan, embedding Vue is pretty much the same as embedding React. It's the embedding part that's annoying. But having a static application means that all the good stuff that Brooks just showed, where we've got these single binaries that'll work anywhere. If we have a static application that's a single binary that'll work anywhere, it can give you a nice rich interface on Mac and Linux and Windows. And there's some other benefits that we might get if almost for free if we did something like Flutter, where you automatically gain the ability to target mobile devices like Android and iOS and things like that. And like I said, I expected that to be hard, but it wasn't. And I was able to get that stuff to use to communicate with the Nats leaf node that wash up starts without any modification.
So Kevin, oh, Bailey, are you talking? You're muted, but you can. Okay. Kevin, I kind of taking a look at this PR, it seems like effectively the requirement for a wasmCloud dashboard is to be a user interface and be able to communicate with NATs. And once you have that, it can issue control interface commands. It can listen to events to update state or, otherwise query Lattice for information. So that's pretty cool because that's not very restrictive. That opens the door for a ton of, like you listed, I think, 4 or 5 possible things here, and that's like certainly not enumerating every possible thing that we could use.
Yeah, the bare minimum is that it needs to be able to communicate using the wasmCloud Lattice control interface protocol. I believe we've got that at least partially documented on the wasmCloud site, but what it really ends up being is that you need to make requests sending JSON payloads over NATs, and you can do that either through the regular NATs TCP protocol, or if you have control over it, you can have NATs start up a WebSocket endpoint, and you can talk to that as well. The difficulty with the WebSocket endpoint is that it's still raw and unvarnished. So when you talk to the WebSocket endpoint on NATs, you're not talking high level stuff. Like you don't make a request to the WebSocket endpoint. You actually send the NATs protocol message across on that endpoint, and then you await more NATs protocol replies on the same thing. So it's more like you've just swapped WebSockets for TCP, and you still have to re-implement the protocol on top.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I feel a general pull towards a couple of different possible alternatives. I don't really feel the pull to keep it in, and I'm just going to state some opinions and then we can talk about it and go from there. I don't really feel the desire to take like the Phoenix app and separate it and then bundle and release it. That seems to bring on a lot of the portability that OTP, some of the things that are downsides. I kind of want it to just be like a regular like JavaScript, HTML, CSS front end, and like no external goodies. I mean, like whether it's React or Vue, just to make things a little easier to manage state and stuff, that's cool. But like doing that seems like it would give us the benefit right away of like we could take advantage of tooling around distributing web assets. We have the option to distribute it around as an actor, although we'll have to think about the way that it interacts with NATs there. And it has the most potential for people to be able to spot a bug in the wasmCloud dashboard and then go in and fix it. Like if we just have if we have a table that's misaligned or something, people who know nothing about Rust or the underlying things of wasmCloud could come in and help us out with some CSS, stuff like that. I think that on a first glance seems like the my favorite option. Although I selfishly, of course, want to be able to play with Flutter and would probably lean more in that direction if we saw a future for the wasmCloud dashboard to be on a really wide variety of screens. So I said a lot of things there, but Kevin, I saw you raise your hand, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, so for me personally, there are a couple of things that I would like to make either easy or default. So it should be super easy to distribute, and I don't ever consider things like JavaScript apps easily distributed. I know there are bundling tools and so on, but it's still messy. You still end up with a giant pile of node module files. It's possible that that just triggers my own frustration. I know other people don't mind the node module stuff, but I like the simplicity of a single binary. I don't really care what the binary is, but I do like the ease of just having a single binary. Yeah, I also have pretty lengthy, high frustration experiences with Node on the desktop and Node for local applications. The other thing that Lachlan brought up is that one of the things that I think should be a requirement that I didn't really include in the RFC is yeah, Patrick, the single binary with embedded web assets is like 3 of the 5 options. One of the things that, and now I've lost my train of thought here. Where was I?
You were saying one of the requirements that you wish you had included is
Right.
subtle here.
Yeah, so there's the one requirement that that I think I need to go back and modify the RFC because I think it should be there is I want to be able to type wash UI and have it bring up whatever this happens to be. And that should be super easy to do. And wash UI should go get it and we should be able to update it easily and things like that. But I should be able, what I want for requirements are, I should be able to run it on a system that doesn't have wash. I should be able to run it with wash UI if I happen to have wash. I should have no big giant pile of dependencies to manage for it. And it should be able to talk to NATs either through regular NATs or through WebSockets. And if we're talking preferences, I think I would prefer to go with something like a static app like Flutter, just for the reason that we do get the single freestanding binary for any of the platforms, and we also gain the future potential to put it on different screens with basically no cost. And additionally, the Flutter one will actually run inside a web page too, so it'll do all of the screens.
Okay, I'm gonna add, I took notes for all of this. Thank you, Kevin. I'm gonna add it to as a comment in the issue. And Jordan or Justin, anybody actually that's got experience with any of these options, especially you, Jordan, because you've done some experimentation already, and you probably have a good idea of what it takes for the WebSocket option. If you could drop any information you have to help us make the right decision, it would be awesome. Oh, Liam, you have your hand raised?
No, it's good. You guys covered it all. I'll drop a hand.
Okay, cool. Well, I know that I've got a couple of notes here that I'll be putting in the community call notes, but just as a takeaway, I'm probably gonna I'll leave a comment on the issue around kind of my desire to have something that's really easy to contribute to, and just anybody can come in and kind of make little fixes. And Kevin, your two proposed requirements about being able to run wash UI to be able to start this. Maybe this even comes up when you run wash up, right? And so you kind of get the whole experience in the dashboard as you did before. And the other requirement that you should be able to run this on a system that does not have wash. So you could kind of hook into hook into the lattice without having the tooling installed there. And the strong preference to have something that can compile down to a single freestanding binary that doesn't doesn't have platform dependencies that we can distribute around. It all sounds really good. I think we're prioritizing the right things around packaging this thing up. There's a little bit of chatter in the chat. I can certainly see us. In my opinion, I kind of feel like the two things that we're going to decide between is using straight up JavaScript and some common framework and writing the dashboard in that, or using Flutter because of how cool it is. And there's just an observation. I don't know if that's quite fair to call at this point. Kevin?
Yeah, I just want to point out that the reason for having Flutter on this in the options list isn't because it's cool. It's while some of us may not be as familiar with Flutter as we are with things like Rust, Flutter is it's by now it's in the boring category already. And there are, I was trying to type it in the chat, but there are a ridiculous amount of Flutter developers out there that I had no idea that community was so large. But like I said, the main reason why it's on that list is because it's cross-platform, it produces a single freestanding binary. It has network access and satisfies a number of the other requirements.
Yeah, great clarification there. Thank you, Kevin. All right, does anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns for this RFC? All right, well, we're going to jump from RFC to RFC. The next one that we really wanted to talk about today, Kevin also wrote this one up, is around transitioning the feature focus to Rust when it comes to writing new wasmCloud features. And this one is completely, just like all the other ones, completely worth reading through the rationale, and the rationale behind it is important, and the retrospective around the last 2 years of working on wasmCloud is, I've been working on it for the last 2 years, and I couldn't have put it any better. This is a wonderful summary of what we've worked on and the things that we've experienced working with Elixir and OTP. And some of you may know the effort that we've been putting in around taking some of these runtime elements and pulling them into the Rust runtime, which is a little lower level than a full wasmCloud runtime, but it includes like wrapping wasm time, the primitives of starting and stopping WebAssembly actors. And I think the best thing to kind of leave up on the screen as I hand it over to Kevin is this this graph of essentially what we're planning on doing over time when it comes to maintaining and adding new features to our different various runtimes. Kevin, would you like to say a little bit more there?
Sure. The super short version is that not too long ago, the OTP host started talking to a new Rust crate underneath for its WebAssembly runtime. At that time, we were able to switch from using Wasmer as the low-level engine to wasmTime, and that gave us immediate access to things like the bleeding edge version and support for experimental components and things like that. So that was a win-win all around. And as the chart shows here, basically we're planning on investing all of our future features time in the Rust crate. And I think in the RFC it's put in there somewhere, but the order of priority is, if we can put it in the reusable Rust crate, we will. If we can put it in the Rust host, we will. And then if it needs to be something that only exists in the OTP host, we will do that in order for things like bug fixes and backwards compatibility and things like that. But so put another way is that the OTP host isn't deprecated, but it is on the road to deprecation. It's still the host that you should be using. It's still a production grade, ready to use host that, you know, Cosmonic is using for all of its back end. Basically, what will happen is at some point, the Rust host will reach feature parity with the OTP host. And when that happens, that's likely when we will officially declare the OTP host deprecated. But we've got some work to do to bring the Rust host up to feature parity.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot that's going to go into this effort. This is going to be a long-standing issue. One thing that I want to mention when we talk about different wasmCloud hosts or what technology we're going to be building them in, especially around this compatibility note, is that the goal for developers of wasmCloud is to not care about what actual host is running their business logic, whether it's running in an OTP host or a Rust host or a browser host. The portability that you get with WebAssembly and the whole point around what we're doing with this wasmCloud thing is for you to not have to care about it. And so that's, of course, going to be front of mind as we're doing some of this feature development. I think this kind of ordered list here is really important. And the bottom line is that you as a wasmCloud developer will be able to swap out an underlying host without actually caring about what technology it's written in. And this RFC talks more and more about the benefits of the different technologies. But I think I just think it's important to point that out as an end user perspective. I think now would be a good time to open the floor. Does anybody have any questions, especially for Kevin on this RFC? Awesome Zoom window there. All right, sounds good. Well, thank you, Kevin, for both of those RFCs and for detailing both of them in the conversation. It's really great. I think now we can move on to our last agenda item of today, which is just around something that we've been talking about for a little bit in the wasmCloud, across the entire wasmCloud org around issue and PR management. There have been issues and PRs that have sat out there for a little while, whether we're waiting on a fix from someone or, kind of temporarily shelved it for other priorities. And there are a lot of repositories under the wasmCloud organization. We have a separation for a couple of our different key aspects of our project. And something that, sometimes I go through a little bit of a mood. I was doing a little spring cleaning the other day where, I was going through some issues that were maybe, a year or two old, and they either didn't apply anymore or they were something that has been, kind of since then fixed. And someone in the community, I can't remember if it was Connor or someone else in Slack, said, that we shouldn't essentially have to do this spring cleaning. And effectively, which this is great because there's already an issue, or there's already, a GitHub application for this. Many other orgs and open source use it, and that's the stale bot. And so I wanted to bring up, just as a point of discussion and to let people know that we've put this across a lot of our different key repos in wasmCloud now. So looking at this actual manifest, and if you're curious, if you're working in open source community and you want to use this, I just installed it into the wasmCloud org from the GitHub marketplace. It's really easy. Essentially, we have this manifest in a lot of our different repositories now, that when an issue or a pull request has been open for over 2 months and no activity has happened in there, meaning no comments, no additional commits, then the stale issue bot kind of goes through, marks it as stale, and then we'll wait another 7 days before closing the issue. We have a couple of labels that are exempt for this. If we've planned it for the roadmap or if we've pinned it intentionally, then it won't be cleaned up. And then security fixes will not be automatically, or security things will not be automatically closed. I've actually changed this stale label to be just stale instead of won't fix, because I thought that it was put on the close time instead of stale marking time. And then, we can define a comment and all that stuff. This is the full implementation, just in case anyone else is curious. But what this actually looks like, I put this into the wasmCloud repo yesterday, and there was a PR or an issue that Roman put in. I guess it was like right on the dot 60 days ago. And the stale issue bot kind of came in and said, hey, we marked this as stale because there hasn't been recent activity, and then added the won't fix label. And this is why I thought it was a little too aggressive to say won't fix, because we're going to fix this one. So I changed it to stale instead. And you can see that this will kind of work here. We did the same thing with this RFC around link management. And I put in a comment this morning saying, essentially we've started addressing this, but we're going to need to prioritize the second half of this RFC. So I really wanted to talk about this just to give people a heads up on kind of what we think and why we're implementing the stale issue bot. And if you have a PR that's marked as stale, or an issue that you filed that's marked as stale in the wasmCloud org, that's just something that's automated, that's going to happen after a certain amount of time. Since we just merged it in, I can see we're probably going to get a lot of them marked as stale over the coming days, as I guess it's a batch job. I don't actually know how it works, but it takes, a couple of hours to actually scan through the issues. So I'm going to be going through those and making sure that they're appropriately marked as we go through. But just a heads up, if your issue gets marked as stale, please feel free to just take that as gentle encouragement to improve, continue activity on that. And I think this is going to be really helpful for us as maintainers to make sure that we don't have too many outstanding issues, and that we're properly prioritizing the work that we're doing in the open source. The whole point of the roadmap label is so that we can take an issue, place it on the wasmCloud roadmap as planned work, and then the stale issue bot can kind of stay in its own lane because we've already prioritized it to do it in a certain amount of time. I know there's a lot of talking, and it's not really too much to that one, but does anybody have any questions? Or I know that we went kind of back and forth in Slack around the amount of time that we want to leave for issues to go stale and how long to close them afterwards. Happy to discuss that as well.
I'm also curious if anybody has used a strategy that's worked really well in other projects that are, maybe at wasmCloud size, maybe even bigger. One thing I really enjoyed working in SIG-CLI is when we had bug scrub, and Eddie runs that bi-weekly. And it's just where a couple of the maintainers get together, and we run through all of the issues created for like kubectl and Kustomize and other places. And it was pretty cool because, we were able to basically say, all right, I'm on Windows, you're on a Mac. Like, can we rep this thing real quick? Yes or no? And if none of us could rep it, then you can immediately be like, hey, I tried the latest version because, it's not working. And it was nice because you got good feedback back to people. But that was necessary because obviously kubectl has a lot of users and a lot of issues get filed.
Well, if anybody has experience with working this in a bigger organization or over time and wants to give us feedback, the wasmCloud Slack is always open. You can find a link to the wasmCloud Slack, especially if you're tuning in on one of our various streaming platforms, on the bottom of the wasmcloud.com site. So please feel free to come over, hang out, and give us your thoughts. All right. Well, I think that is the end of our planned agenda today. We had some really good discussion around the RFCs that are out, and I was really happy to show you the little demo of doing a bunch of wash ups and wash downs and things. I think this is a great time for just general discussion around the wasmCloud community or things in the broader WebAssembly ecosystem. I feel like I usually look to Bailey for updates around the, WASI component model, bytecode alliance, all those things. But this is just general free time. Please feel free to speak up if there's something you want to talk about. Wide group today. All right, friends. Well, then I think that we'll call it for this community meeting. I'm going to hang out on the call afterwards if anybody wants to continue to chat. But otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week